It was one of those calm, crisp mornings where even the air felt too quiet to disturb. The sun was shining over the lake, its surface glimmering like liquid glass, and the faint hum of sprinklers filled the neatly trimmed lawns of Oak Ridge Estates. Everything about that neighborhood screamed perfection. Rows of manicured hedges, driveways free of a single oil stain, and mailboxes polished enough to catch your reflection. To outsiders, it looked like paradise. To those who lived there, it was more like a prison wrapped in white fences and HOA rules. I had moved into Oak Ridge 3 months earlier, not as a civilian, but as part of a quiet federal task force operation. My green utility Jeep, marked discreetly as federal police, was stationed in front of my rented house, an unassuming cover for surveillance work tied to a case that had been months in the making. I didn't socialize, didn't attend community events, and definitely didn't answer HOA newsletters. The less people knew, the safer the operation stayed. But there was one person who couldn't stand my presence. Her name was Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. She was the type who could detect an unapproved trash emplacement from 2 blocks away. Power wasn't just something she had. It was something she worshipped. Her word in Oak Ridge wasn't suggestion. It was law. And she made sure everyone knew it. From the moment my Jeep appeared in the neighborhood, she'd been on the warpath. Military-looking vehicles violate HOA aesthetics, she had shouted during our first encounter, her perfectly ironed navy blazer stiff with authority. I'd simply nodded, my arms crossed, keeping my words short and professional. It's a government vehicle, ma'am. Temporary assignment. But Karen wasn't the kind of woman to take temporary as an answer. Over the weeks, she complained repeatedly to the board, left warning slips on my windshield, and even called local law enforcement, who quickly backed off after confirming federal jurisdiction. That only made her more furious. Then came the day she crossed a line she could never uncross. It started with the sound of metal snapping, sharp, deliberate, and wrong. I had just stepped out of the shower when I heard it. Through my front window, I spotted her, platinum curls gleaming under the sun, bolt cutters in hand, leaning over the lock that secured the Jeep's front gate. Her face was twisted with a self-satisfied grin, the kind that only appears when someone believes they finally won. She wasn't alone. 2 of her HOA enforcers, men in polo shirts with clipboards, stood nearby, arms crossed, watching as she clipped through the chain like she was cutting ribbon at a grand opening. That moment stretched into eternity. My blood boiled, but my training kicked in. I grabbed my badge, holstered my sidearm, and stepped outside calmly. "Ma'am," I said, voice low but sharp, "I suggest you stop right there." Karen spun around, startled for half a second before recovering her signature sneer. "You can't keep that vehicle here," she snapped. "It violates HOA policy. I've sent you multiple notices. You refuse to comply, so I'm having it towed." I took one slow step closer. "You cut through a government-issued lock on federal property." Her smirk faltered. "Don't be ridiculous. This is a neighborhood issue." Behind me, I heard the sound of heavy boots approaching. My backup, 2 agents who had been stationed a few houses down, were already on their way, radios buzzing quietly. The air shifted. The 2 HOA enforcers looked uneasy now, realizing this wasn't just a petty dispute anymore. I could almost feel Karen's defiance harden again, fueled by her own delusions of authority. "If it's parked here, it's under HOA jurisdiction," she barked, jabbing her finger at me. "I don't care who you are. Move this car now, or I'll—" She didn't get to finish. One of the agents stepped forward, badge gleaming in the sunlight. "Ma'am, this vehicle is part of an ongoing federal operation. By damaging or tampering with it, you've just committed a felony." Her mouth dropped open. The 2 men behind her slowly backed away. For the first time, the self-proclaimed queen of Oak Ridge looked unsure of herself. But pride is a powerful thing. She tried to laugh it off, forcing a shaky smile. "Oh, please. This is absurd. I'm not scared of your little badges." I crossed my arms and leaned against the Jeep, keeping my tone even. "You should be scared of the paperwork that's coming your way. You tamper with evidence in a federal case, obstructed an active investigation, and vandalized government property." Her confidence cracked completely. She looked from me to the agents, realizing too late that this wasn't some neighborhood squabble. This was the real world, where rules have consequences. Still, she wasn't done. You can't just bring military vehicles into a family neighborhood, she hissed. We have standards here. People like you. People like me? I interrupted, my voice tightening. You mean people who protect your family while you argue about lawn colors? That silenced her. The two agents stood motionless, eyes locked on me, letting the words hang in the air. Even the golden retriever from next door sat quietly on the grass, as if sensing the weight of the moment. For a long second, the neighborhood was still. The only sound was a rustle of wind through the trees and the slow tick of the Jeep's cooling engine. Karen finally stepped back, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. I'll be contacting my attorney, she muttered, trying to regain her composure. I nodded calmly. You do that. But in the meantime, you'll be hearing from federal legal counsel about the damage you cause. As she stormed off, the agents exchanged glances, then turned to me. Guess the HOA won't be hosting a welcome barbecue anytime soon, one of them joked. I allowed myself the smallest smile. No, I said, but I have a feeling this neighborhood's about to learn what happens when you cut the wrong lock. What I didn't realize then was that Karen's interference had triggered something far bigger than a simple HOA argument. Her rash action had exposed parts of our undercover setup. And by the next morning, everything in Oak Ridge would spiral into chaos. Hook for Section 2. When the HOA's power-hungry queen unleashed her fury on a federal operation, she didn't just break a lock. She cracked open a web of secrets that were never meant to surface. The question was no longer about a Jeep. It was about control, corruption, and what really hides behind perfect white fences. CTA, end of Section 1. If you think cutting a federal lock was bad, wait until you see what Karen did next. Keep reading Section 2 to discover how one HOA's obsession with control turned an entire neighborhood into a battleground. The next morning, Oak Ridge Estates no longer looked perfect. For the first time since I'd moved in, the immaculate rows of identical homes seemed tense. Curtains shifted when I drove by. Neighbors who used to wave now peeked through blinds, whispering among themselves. The calm that once defined the neighborhood had been replaced with a thick fog of curiosity and fear. Karen's little stunt with the lock hadn't stayed quiet. Word had spread faster than wildfire, twisting as it went. By sunrise, the HOA Facebook group was flooded with speculation. Federal agents are surveilling us. Someone's under investigation. Karen's being framed. And my personal favorite, that Jeep's got a satellite uplink and night vision. They weren't entirely wrong. The vehicle did have some specialized gear, but it wasn't a concern. What they didn't know was that Oak Ridge was under discreet observation because of something far darker than HOA drama. For months, our task force had been tracing a series of financial fraud networks operating out of upper-class suburban communities. Oak Ridge wasn't just a postcard-perfect neighborhood. It was a hub for shell companies laundering government funds through community development projects. The HOA's rigid structure made it a perfect front. Nobody questioned the endless flow of invoices, maintenance budgets, and improvement initiatives. On paper, it was legal perfection. Beneath the surface, it was criminal genius. And Karen? She was at the center of it all, whether she knew it or not. When I arrived at the local field office later that morning, my superior, Agent Lopez, was waiting by the briefing board, coffee in hand, expression tight. She cut through a federal lock? He asked, disbelief in his tone. She did, I replied, in front of witnesses. Lopez let out a low whistle. You have to hand it to her. That's either fearless or stupid. Both, I said dryly. But it's not random. She's too obsessed with control. Someone's feeding her information or using her temper to stir things up. Lopez nodded, tapping a file against the table. You might be right. We've been monitoring HOA financial transfers for weeks, but the last 2 days, the movement spiked. A lot of money is being shifted through a landscaping contract, one she approved personally. I leaned in, scanning the ledger. $450,000 for lakefront restoration? That's 10 times what it should cost. Exactly, Lopez said. And guess what? The company's a ghost. Address traces back to an empty lot 2 towns over. So that was it. Karen wasn't just nosy. She was standing on a nest of corruption, maybe unknowingly protecting the people profiting from it. That evening, I returned to Oak Ridge, tension simmering beneath the neighborhood's polished calm. The air smelled like fresh mulch, sprinklers hissing rhythmically along the sidewalks. Karen's house stood out like a throne, white brick, pristine hedges, and a brand-new flag fluttering from her porch. Her car was gone, but her assistant, a nervous man named Roger, was outside rearranging potted plants with mechanical precision. I approached casually. "Evening," I greeted. "Quiet day, I hope?" Roger froze mid-motion. "Oh, officer. Sir, yes, quiet. Just following orders. Ms. Whitmore likes everything precise." "Does she?" I said, pretending to glance at my phone. "You handle her financial paperwork, too?" He hesitated. "Sometimes. She doesn't trust digital records. Makes me print everything." "Smart," I replied. "Or paranoid." Roger smiled weakly but didn't respond. His eyes darted toward the house. That told me enough. People around Karen feared her more than they respected her. She ruled Oak Ridge not through leadership, but intimidation. I didn't press further. I already knew we'd get what we needed another way. 2 days later, the break came from an unexpected source. The very thing Karen worshipped. Her HOA meetings. Lopez and I attended incognito. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse, a sterile, over-decorated room filled with homeowners clutching coffee cups and murmuring anxiously. Karen stood at the front, posture rigid, smile painted on. "Before we begin," she announced, "I'd like to address the recent incident involving federal authorities." The crowd murmured louder. "I assure you," she continued, "it was a misunderstanding. The vehicle has since been identified, and the situation is being resolved internally." I could feel every eye in the room flick toward me, even though I was sitting quietly in the back, baseball cap pulled low. Karen's tone sharpened. "However, I must remind everyone that the HOA maintains jurisdiction over this neighborhood. Any unauthorized activity, no matter how official, will not be tolerated." That was my cue. I stood, the motion quiet but commanding. The room froze. "With all due respect, Ms. Whitmore, you don't have jurisdiction over federal investigations." Her smile faltered. "I beg your pardon?" I pulled out my badge. "Special Agent Dean Carter, Federal Task Force Division. I've been assigned here for an ongoing financial investigation. As of this morning, your HOA accounts have been flagged for review under the Financial Transparency Act." The silence was deafening. Papers rustled. Someone gasped. Karen's hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her blazer. "This is outrageous. You can't just—" "Actually," I interrupted, "we can, and we already did." Lopez entered the room, flashing his own badge. "Ma'am, your signature appears on transactions linking Oak Ridge's funds to a shell corporation under investigation for laundering stolen federal grants. We'll need you to come with us for questioning." Karen's face drained of color. "This is a mistake," she whispered, shaking her head. "I didn't know about any of that. I just signed what Roger brought me." Roger, who had been standing near the door, suddenly looked ready to bolt. I signaled the agent by the exit. Too late. Roger darted toward the parking lot. Chaos erupted. Homeowners jumped back as Lopez and 2 officers chased after him. Karen stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the podium. "Roger? What's happening?" she shouted. Moments later, Lopez returned, holding a briefcase they'd confiscated. He placed it on the table with a dull thud and flipped it open. Inside were stacks of receipts, encrypted drives, and handwritten notes connecting the HOA's fake projects to offshore accounts. Karen's voice cracked. "I didn't know. I thought it was just community improvements." "Community improvements don't come with wire transfers to the Cayman Islands," Lopez replied coldly. The crowd was speechless. I stepped forward. "Ma'am, whether you knew or not, you signed off on the transfers. You'll need to cooperate with us fully." For the first time, her commanding tone vanished. She wasn't the HOA tyrant anymore. She was just a frightened woman who'd realized she was a pawn in something she couldn't control. But something still didn't add up. As we escorted her outside, I noticed a shadowed figure standing near the tree line across the street, watching. He wasn't one of ours. He didn't belong to the HOA either. When I turned to get a better look, he vanished into the woods. That image stuck with me all night. The silent observer, the vanishing figure. If Roger was the middleman, who was he working for? By the following day, Oak Ridge had turned into a circus of flashing lights, unmarked vehicles, and stunned residents. Agents combed through files, seized laptops, and interviewed homeowners. The perfect facade of suburban peace crumbled under the weight of hidden corruption. Karen sat on her porch, silent and pale. Her lawyer hovered nearby, murmuring reassurances she barely heard. Every now and then, she glanced at me, eyes hollow. When the news crew arrived, she finally spoke. "I thought I was protecting my community," she said softly. "I just wanted order. I didn't know I was helping criminals hide behind it." Her words weren't an excuse. They were the first sign of understanding. Too late to save her position, but maybe enough to save her soul. That night, I returned to my Jeep parked under the same streetlight she'd once tried to banish it from. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, calm again, like nothing had ever happened. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Roger had been working for someone, a name buried deep inside those encrypted drives. And whoever they were, they had just lost a major income stream, which meant they'd come looking for whoever shut it down. By dawn, the lake shimmered like glass, quiet and deceitfully peaceful, as if the chaos of the night before had never happened. But the silence couldn't hide the truth anymore. The street that once gleamed with perfect lawns and picket fences was now filled with police cruisers, flashing lights reflecting off the calm water. The same neighbors who used to wave and gossip at the HOA meetings now peeked through their blinds, too afraid to step outside. I stood on my porch, watching the task force move in. Officers in dark uniforms carried boxes of documents from the HOA president's house. The air smelled like wet grass and gasoline, heavy with the weight of reckoning. My Jeep, once the target of a petty HOA complaint, sat proudly near the barricade, its lock replaced, the task force insignia shining under morning light. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. What started as a community violation had exploded into a federal investigation. Detective Harlan joined me, holding his coffee like it was the only normal thing left. "You ready to see her?" he asked, nodding toward the street where Karen stood, cornered by two officers. "I've been ready since the day she cut that lock," I said, my voice steady but low. Karen looked nothing like the woman who once strutted through the neighborhood with a clipboard and a fake smile. Her perfect curls were flattened, her face pale and tight with disbelief. She wasn't yelling this time. She was pleading. The same woman who fined people for leaving garbage cans out an extra hour was now surrounded by men and women who dealt with real crimes. She saw me approaching, and her eyes widened, her lips trembling. "You did this," she spat, anger flaring for a moment. "You set me up." I stopped a few feet away. "No, Karen. You set yourself up when you cut the lock on a federal vehicle. You thought you were above everyone. Turns out, the law doesn't take kindly to arrogance." Her eyes darted to the Jeep, the task force seal still visible on the side. "I was protecting our community," she said weakly. "From what?" I asked. "Decency? Common sense." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Her hands trembled as she crossed her arms, glancing around the officers, dismantling everything she built her power on. The sound of handcuffs clicking around her wrists was softer than I expected, almost peaceful, like a final punctuation to her chaos. As the squad car door shut behind her, I felt something shift in the air. The dog that had always followed her around, a golden retriever that everyone secretly loved more than her, sat by the curb, ears down, eyes sad but calm. It was as if even the dog knew justice had arrived. Detective Harlan walked over, tucking his notepad into his pocket. "Turns out," he said, "she wasn't just bossing people around. We found records of embezzled funds, maintenance money, lake restoration fees, community repairs, all funneled into fake accounts. She used HOA power as her cover." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "So, this wasn't just about my Jeep." He shook his head. "You were just the spark. She picked the wrong person to mess with." I watched as more board members were escorted out, their eyes hollow, their once superior postures reduced to slumped shame. The neighborhood that prided itself on order was now stripped bare, its ugly secrets laid open. For the first time in years, it looked real, imperfect, human. Weeks passed before things settled. The HOA was dissolved, the fraud exposed, and the properties transferred under state supervision. Neighbors began talking again, not about rules or violations, but about rebuilding. The air felt lighter. Kids played without fear of being fined for noise, and people started mowing each other's lawns instead of writing complaints about them. One afternoon, as I washed the Jeep, a few neighbors walked over with curious smiles. "You keeping her?" One of them asked, nodding toward the vehicle. "Yeah," I said. "She's earned her place here." The golden retriever, now without a home, wandered up to me, tail wagging, as if it had chosen its new owner. I knelt down, rubbing behind its ears, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in my chest. Maybe this was what peace looked like: quiet, honest, unpretentious. As the sun dipped behind the lake, painting the water in amber, I leaned against the Jeep, letting the hum of crickets fill the silence. My phone buzzed, a message from Harlan. Checked the new filings. Someone's trying to start another HOA. Different name, same people. I smiled, shaking my head. Some lessons take longer to sink in. But this time we were ready. The community wasn't afraid anymore. The masks had fallen, and everyone had seen what happens when ego crosses justice. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring balance. Rules matter, but only when they're built on fairness, not power. And sometimes, standing up for what's right doesn't just save your property. It saves your peace. So if you ever find yourself cornered by people hiding behind authority, remember this. Speak up, hold your ground, and never let fear silence you. Locks can be broken, but truth always finds its way through. Because when justice flows, even the proudest walls can't hold it back. ChatGPT.